Hi, welcome to the Knits Up podcast. I'm your host, Mindy, otherwise known as Knitter CNY. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram as Knitter CNY, and you can find a podcast group over on Ravelry and a Facebook page for the Knits Up podcast. I've also just found out that that the podcast is on the iHeart Media app as well on the podcast page, so you can find me there as well. I hope everybody has had a decent week. It's been interesting to say the least. When we talked last week, there wasn't a whole lot other than the emergency declaration that had started. Now everybody knows New York State has the most cases in the entire nation. We're setting up field hospitals. Everybody who is a non-essential worker in New York State come Monday morning will be at home. They've also asked, not really asked, but told all 70 and older citizens in New York State and anyone with a compromised immune system to remain at home. I will be at work. I don't fall into either of those categories, and I am considered essential personnel because the laboratory where I've been a secretary for almost 25 years runs drinking water and wastewater tests for municipalities across the state. We're a commercial lab, but we do that because a lot of little towns don't want to pay. Doesn't make economic sense to pay, say, a wastewater plant employee to be able to run all of the tests that we do at a lower cost. It costs the town less money to contract out for that. So I'm sure that is really, really not interesting to anybody. The only thing that was related to work this week is that if you are using disinfecting wipes, like a Lysol disinfecting wipe or something like that, and you're hooked up to a sewer system, please do not flush those down the toilet. Please throw them in your trash. That's where they need to go. Wastewater operators are telling people that those clog up the pipes. It literally takes time and it makes it more difficult. Their job's much more difficult. Those wipes stay almost whole all the way to the wastewater plant, and they're basically, you don't even want to know. It's disgusting. But look at it this way, just throw those in your trash, please. So anyways, moving on to something much more pleasant. That would be what I've been knitting this week. I finished a hat out of Lion brand Ferris wheel in the full moon colorway. I knit that hat for the Hat Not Hate campaign. You can find more information at I'm saying that wrong. You can find more information at hatnothate.org. That is an anti-bullying campaign. And I've got 2 hats that I've made out of that Ferris wheel, so it's a really economical yarn for that. I've also knit a hat out of Lion brand Thick and Quick in, I think it's the Astroland colorway. And then I also have a cake of Lion brand Mandala Ombre that's in the Harmony colorway that I'm going to knit a couple hats out of. And then I've got some ZZ Twist yarn that's in like a royal blue color that I'm going to probably knit crochet a couple of hats out of, because I think that yarn is designed more for crochet. It's Z-spun so that it doesn't untwist itself as you're crocheting. And I had bought a skein of that on sale. The other thing that I picked up tonight was my Cityscape shawl. This is a pattern from Red Heart. I can't remember the designer's name off the top of my head. And it uses 4 balls of Colorscape yarn, which I had bought on sale at Hobby Lobby last summer. The yarn, I believe, is 100% acrylic. I just grabbed the color. Just grabbed it. I've got... Yeah, I think it's 100% acrylic. It's a roving type style yarn. And the colors I have, I think, are Sydney. And this one says Mykonos, which I'm assuming is like Greek. Mykonos sounds Greek. And I think the other one's Sydney, but let me double check that. Sorry, Barcelona. Barcelona and Mykonos. Barcelona, I would describe the colors, is yellow, sort of a weird ambery yellow, sort of a purpley fuchsia color, a teal color, and like there's sort of a berry color in there too. And the yarn kind of barber poles, if you're familiar with that term or you know what a barber pole looks like, that's what this yarn does. So it gradually changes. And the other yarn, the Mykonos yarn, is a teal and green. It doesn't have quite as, the color change is not quite as severe as the Barcelona is, but that teal color is in both of those yarns, so I figured they kind of were in the same family, but different enough that the contrast would show up in this project. It's an asymmetrical, shallow shawl / scarf that's quite long. It starts at a small point and then grows asymmetrically so that one side, it almost looks like a diamond, but if one side of the diamond was on a steeper angle than the other. And then you're supposed to do a center double decrease, and then do it in garter stitch. It's knitting every row. What I chose to do was on the back side, wrong side row, I chose to purl that stitch where the center double decrease is. So I'm getting a very distinct spine up it, almost like a little welt type of thing, a little line up all the way up this shawl. And so I am on the decreasing portion of it. I'm almost done with my 2 balls of yarn that I originally started with, and then I will start in with my other 2 balls of yarn. It takes 2 each of 2 different colors of the Colorscape yarn. I mentioned I had bought this on sale at Hobby Lobby last summer. I'm looking at the clearance price tag and it said it was $1.54 that I paid for each of these. Originally, these were $6 a skein. So it went from costing $24 a skein to being about $6, which is not bad. A lot of the yarn that I have in my yarn stash / collection is like that. I've bought it on sale. Some of the stuff I have not bought on sale, but that is kind of rare. Last year, about a year and a month ago, I think we talked about this, but I'll kind of refresh your memory. I went to a yarn auction with a friend of mine who also knits and crochets. We had found out about it from somebody else, and they said, there's an auction, and they have a lot of household items, but there's a bunch of yarn there, too. I thought, this is really weird, So I'm thinking, maybe it's a couple bags of yarn or whatever. No, it was bags and bags and more bags and more bags. We'll come to find out when we looked this up later, it was somebody that had not only run a floral shop, but the gentleman had also run a yarn shop at one time and apparently had kept all the inventory. including patterns. So I have a bunch of patterns that I got from that too. And I ended up buying, I think it's over 30 skeins of yarn. Two of them are the Encore, Plymouth Encore worsted. One is like a burgundy colorway, and the other one is a cream colorway. That's a 75% acrylic, 25% wool mix. I made an Afghan square years ago. A knitting guild I belonged to made an Afghan to like auction off, I think was what we did with it. And we each made a square. It was great for cabling, really nice yarn for that. And then I bought, I think I bought like 10 skeins of Galaxy wool yarn. You'd know it if you saw it. And then enough of Peyton's Norse spun yarn, which is an acrylic wool mix that was made back in probably the 80s or early 90s. To make myself like a jacket. It was supposed to be kind of like Lopey, but obviously not Lopey. It's supposed to be a bulky weight, but it's a little thinner. If you're familiar with Lopey and Let Lopey, it's sort of in between there. They call it a bulky, but it's a thin bulky. It may bloom when it gets knit up, but it should be kind of nice for that. Purple's the main color of that. That was, it was different. It's been a long time since I've been to an auction. I went to one as a kid. My parents used to go to them for fun when they were first married. Cheap entertainment. If you can't afford something, you don't buy it, but you watch watch all this stuff that comes up, and what's that? Okay, what's that? And we went to one as a kid. I went to one or two as a kid because, they would buy, a piece of furniture or something for around the house, and it was nice stuff at a reasonable price. There wasn't eBay back in the 70s and 80s. So it was kind of interesting. You never knew what you'd get, but it's something interesting to do in the winter or in the summer. Yard sales, tag sales, that sort of thing. I have built up a stash over the years. I've been knitting for over 30 years, and I am well off with yarn, I guess, because of the purchases I've made. I feel good in that I have given away some yarn fairly recently, before this whole virus Among Us thing started. I had a family member who's in the healthcare industry who got back into crocheting around Christmas time, and wanted some cotton. She posted something about something she'd made, and it was nice. And I said, "Oh, what do you want some yarn?" I got yarn. And so I shipped her up a box of cotton yarn, which is what she requested, including all sorts of weights, like a wheel of shawl yarn that was cotton and acrylic, or it might have been 100% cotton, I'm not sure, and then dishcloth cotton, that sort of thing. And then I had a friend of mine who was making hats and for a project, and wanted bulky weight yarn, so I pulled out a lot of bulky weight yarn, but obviously not all of it, out of my stash that was, like one or two skeins of something that would only ever make hats anyways, and there was no way I was in a million years going to knit or crochet all of this, so I decided to pull that out and give it to her. But I'm kind of glad that I do have a stash because I probably won't be buying yarn for quite a while. I don't need any more yarn, and I have enough projects to work on. I think we talked about last time I have enough yarn to knit 37 pairs of socks. Could I knit 37 pairs of socks if I have to be home at any point? Probably, if I was sitting around all day long and had some motivation. My main problem is, I don't know if you're like this, I tend to get sucked in by the internet, waiting for an update of what's going on. Do I have to pay attention to something else? Is there, some other restriction that's in place that I need to know about? Is there, something that I need to know about? So, I'm trying not to look at stuff too much. I've mostly been watching, if you are stuck in the house and you have an Amazon Prime account, I highly recommend, if you do not have Amazon Video on your TV and you have a USB port, buy one of those Fire Sticks if you can afford it, because that's fabulous for getting stuff. There's a lot of free apps on there. Or you can download apps to your phone that give you free television. Um, plug in a set of little earbuds and you're away. Pluto TV would be one that I highly recommend. Viacom owns them, and they have, right now they're running a James Bond movie channel again with some of the classic James Bond movies from back in the day. Um, I'm always interested in that. I'm trying to remember the movie. It's kind of odd because the home that I live in is the childhood home I grew up in, and the I had to chuckle because it was on this afternoon. The movie, I want to say it's License to Kill, with Timothy Dalton, I believe it is. When my parents were young, they bought this house from a couple whose son is an actor. He plays one of the villains in a James Bond movie. He is the accountant in the License to Kill movie. Of course, I wasn't around when they bought the house. I wasn't born until years later. But I always get a chuckle out of that because whenever I watch that movie, I think, "Wow, he lived in this house." It's kind of funny. It's like one of those things where you're like, interesting. You know, it's always one of those things where you're like, it's like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, even though I've never met this person in my life, and he moved out when he was 5, I guess. So that's all we've got going now. I'm just watching movies and relaxing and keeping an eye on the river down the street. It's, a nice view. I was in this weekend, basically watching movies and knitting. I did get out today for curbside service at our local Chili's restaurant, because they have a 3 for $10 special that I thought was pretty decent. I wanted some tortilla chips and some salsa and stuff. So I ordered that online, paid for it online, drove over to the restaurant about 15 minutes away from my house, opened, when I saw the waitress come out, she stood back. I opened up the back door for her, and then I stood back, and then she put the bag of stuff in the back, handed me the soda with a gloved hand, and, we never made contact, at all other than that. And then I was on my way, and, I tipped generously, so tried to do that because all of our restaurants in New York State are closed down for dining in service. They are still open for takeout and drive-through pickup, that sort of thing. And a lot of the smaller restaurants are on an individual basis deciding whether they want to remain open or not. It depends on what their situation is. My dad is in a nursing home. He's still doing well. They're all on lockdown. He's doing well because he has an Amazon Tap speaker, and then he also has a little Amazon Dot. With the Dot, he's able to call out to anybody that he wants to talk to. I am able to call him. I usually call him once a day and find out how he's doing. He's a little bored because he's inside, but he's doing well other than that. So that's about all that's been going on this week. I am going to open up a thread over on the Ravelry podcast group, or you can post over to the Facebook group if you'd like to. Just put in a picture of what you're working on this week, so we can kind of all get an update of what you've been working on, or show me a yarn from your yarn stash if you'd like to do that too. Whatever works for you. I know this has been a little crazy time, and everybody's situation is basically the same but slightly different. I I have friends who are working from home. I have some who are not working from home. 3 family members, 3 who are in the medical field. I initially forgot about the third one, but when I was just talking now, there's a third one. So be thinking of those people this week. Check on your neighbors, give them a phone call, stand at the end of the driveway and wave, say, how are you doing? Do you need anything? That sort of thing. And I hope that everyone is well. And I will meet you here next week to hopefully give you a little distraction for a little while. Go craft something. It's good for your soul.